तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So in the last class, we saw that Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that Vidyasagar is a Siddha. So there we find that just hearing that, Vidyasagar asked that how is that, sir? What do you mean that I am Siddha? So how is it that, sir? So the master then replied laughing. So when potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. And you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate. And there was a laughter. As we indicated, there's a pun of word. In Bengali, the word Siddha means boiled. And Siddha, of course, in Sanskrit as well as in Bengali means the one who is accomplished, who has got established in spiritual knowledge, who has realized. A realized soul is a Siddha. And again, anything which is boiled is Siddha. So when Sri Ramakrishna indicated that you are already Siddha, so Vidyasagar asked that what do you mean by that word Siddha? And then Sri Ramakrishna made a pun of that word by saying, see that when potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. So you are such a humble soul. That the experiences of life have made you such a humble, compassionate being. So you are also a Siddha in that sense. So that you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate. And immediately Vidyasagar, so he's after all a very intelligent person. So immediately he replied, laughing, but when the paste of kalai pulse is boiled, it becomes all the harder. So immediately Vidyasagar replied by giving the example of a particular type of lentil. It's kalai. It's not very familiar here in Australia. It's even in India, it's not very familiar, not very popular dal. It's something which in the eastern part of India, in West Bengal, it's a particular type of lentil called kalai dal, which when boiled, instead of becoming soft, it becomes harder. So Vidyasagar is just responding by saying, why, sir? Does anything boiling means becoming soft? There are like kalai pulse, which becomes harder. So the experiences of life, which instead of making us wiser, may make us more reactive. We find that the situations of life may make us dejected. We cannot go, avoid the circumstances of life. The circumstances of life, how we react to it, that speaks of our character, that speaks of our integrity. Some may become dejected, some may become highly reactive, some may become very, criticizing by nature, and others just we find opposite. From the experience, they learn to be more compassionate. They feel that all the hardships which I went through life, it is because of not getting cooperation from the people who is around me. So how much that cooperation was needed? Why not I extend to the people whom I find dejected? So that's the other way of reacting. So we can take the situation, how we react to the situation is totally on which I have control. I have no control over the situations of life, but how I react to it, on that I do have control. And here we find the master immediately is responding, how nicely. But you don't belong to that class, that those who become hardened by the experiences of life, you don't belong to that class. Mere pandits are like diseased fruit that becomes hard and will not ripen at all. So that, as in the last class, we were saying that how we react to the situation, that we decide. That as a human being, we are responsible. No other creatures are responsible for their actions. All the creatures acts as per their instinct. They cannot go beyond their instinct. It is almost a fixed stimuli-response conditioning. For the human being, we have the capacity to respond as per our choice. So that's why the word responsibility can be broken as responsibility. I have the ability to respond as per my choice. No other creature can do it. And on that depends my evolution. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna is nicely speaking, that your nature shows that you have responded to the circumstances of life in a very positive manner, and that have made you compassionate. So such fruit has neither, then Sri Ramakrishna told that mere pandits are like diseased fruit that becomes hard and will not ripen at all. Such fruit has neither the freshness of green fruit nor the flavor of ripe. So they neither have the yearning which ripens to realization. When we read the scriptures, if it is merely for intellectual knowledge, it speaks what? That I neither have the yearning for realization. And if you don't have the yearning, you can never evolve spiritually and realize the spiritual truth in your life. So by saying that neither he has the freshness of the green fruit nor the flavor of the ripe, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that those mere pandits, neither they have the yearning nor they have the realization. The yearning ripens into realization. So he have neither of them. But pandits have neither yearning nor realization. And then he's giving an example that what's the nature of academic knowledge. Those who never try to internalize the values, just the knowledge is meant for intellectual purpose. What's their nature? He's very nicely is indicating. Vultures soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to woman and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. So as we were indicating in the last class, that real education is the nervous association of ideas. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, that unless our education helps us to internalize the values, it's of no use. As in the modern science, there are so many branches of science which indicates the spiritual origin of the universe. Panpsychology, epigenetics, there are many such fields where we find that there is an indication of the consciousness as the foundation, as the real substance behind the creation. But you will find it is only merely for academic knowledge. Those knowledge in no way helps us to evolve spiritually. That if, after all, that the consciousness is the be-all and end-all of existence, what it has to do with my life, if I never think that way, that I have to become more dispassionate. Just to give an example, even in the modern science, with all our advancement in the neurology, a very common phrase which is used in modern science is that we are all chemistry. So when you are angry, it is certain hormones, certain enzymes that are secreted. When you are feeling love, certain hormones, certain enzymes are secreted. So when you say that my love is something very genuine, even modern science will say it is a matter of pure chemistry. And from that, if you just see what's the question, how the question of orientation comes. So if it's a matter of mere chemistry, in the modern world, how they interpret it in the materialistic way, that all these relations and everything as such has no, that the question of sticking to the relation, to have a resolution that I will be just very faithful to the resolution, has no meaning. It's just a mere, when a one person come in what is association with another person, certain chemistry is going on that gives you a feeling of high. There it ends. What is the need for having a resolution behind that? And you will find that how it leads to a tremendous type of materialistic civilization, where at last we find we are all the psychological wrecks, that throughout the life, these harsh experiences we are going through, we are just going for the mad pleasures of life. At last, it is just simply draining us, squeezing us, wrenching us. That's one way of thinking. The other way of thinking is, yes, it's chemistry. Even in science, even in yoga, it doesn't need the modern science. If you read the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, how nicely you will find this idea that everything is chemistry has been indicated. But what is the orientation? If that's the chemistry, be detached, be the observer. Don't get involved too much with the sensate pleasures of life. One orientation is saying get more and more involved in it, and don't think of any sort of that seriousness in the relations. And the other is speaking that don't go for serious relations at all, but at the end, be detached. Don't get too much involved. And that helps in evolving. You no more, just the opposite thing happens. You don't become a psychological wreck. You become more and more integrated. So now we will understand that how the same knowledge with different type of orientation can lead to totally to different type of growth. One can lead to destruction. One can lead us spirally downwards. The other can take me spirally upwards. So that's why this that internalization of the values is very much necessary, not mere education. So that's why how nice example Swami is giving, that vultures soar, Ramakrishna is giving, vultures soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to woman and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. Vidyasagar listened to these words in silence. The others too gazed at the master and were attentive to every word he said. Vidyasagar was very reticent about giving religious instruction to others. He had studied Hindu philosophy. Once, when M had asked him his opinion of it, Vidyasagar had said, I think the philosophers have failed to explain what was in their minds, but in his daily life, he followed all the rituals of Hindu religion and wore the sacred thread of a Brahmin. About God, he had once declared, it is indeed impossible to know him. What then should be our duty? It seems to me that we should live in such a way that if others followed our example, this very earth would be heaven. Everyone should try to do good to the world. So we find that that's the utilitarian ideal, the utilitarian value that was spoken of as the highest ideal. That as per our spiritual goal is concerned, most of them were agnostic. we don't know whether God is or not. But to be good and do good is the be all and end all of our religious existence. And Vidyasagar, we find, is also subscribing to that type of ideology. So that's what we find from this word, that about God he had once declared, it is indeed impossible to know him. What then should be our duty? So that agnosticism finds through that expression that it is impossible to know him. And indirectly what he's saying is, we need not bother about it. It seems to me that we should live in such a way that if others follow our example, this very earth should be heaven, would be heaven. Everyone should try to do good to the world. Sri Ramakrishna's conversation now turned to the knowledge of Brahman. So in skipping this in the background, that Vidyasagar had the idea that it is impossible to know him. So in this context, what Ramakrishna is saying, we will find has some significance. What he's saying, Brahman is beyond Vidya and Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. It is beyond Maya, the illusion of duality. So when we say Brahman is beyond knowledge and ignorance, so here the knowledge doesn't mean the absolute knowledge. Absolute knowledge is the one with Brahman. When you are established in that absolute knowledge is Brahman. So when here it is speaking that he is beyond knowledge and ignorance, it is actually the knowledge which we understand in this ordinary way. When I say I know, it is when you say I know, that is what the knowledge, there is some knowledge of which you know. It is you who know, that speaks of your knowledge. And when you say I don't know, that speaks of your ignorance. So now we will understand that when we say that Brahman is beyond knowledge and ignorance, what it is actually indicating, that when I say I know, there is someone who is witnessing my knowledge, that what I know, that when I say I know, that I am witnessing, that I know that I know. When you say I don't know, it is you know that we don't know, isn't it? Means it is you who, that self-reflective awareness is saying, I don't know. Now take that self-reflective awareness. The one who says, I know, it is the same self-reflective awareness which is saying, I don't know. So you are the witness of both the knowledge and the ignorance. You as the witness, you are the witness of both the knowledge. When you say, I know, it is you who are the witness of that knowledge. When you say, I don't know, again, it is you who are the witness of the ignorance. So all the knowledge and ignorance which belongs to this phenomenal existence, for that, there is some witness which is the same. The one who says, I know, it is the same person who says, I don't know. So these are all speculative way of understanding these sentences, that when Brahman, we says beyond Vidya and Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. He is something beyond that. So he can never be deluded. To give another example, suppose when I see that this is a very common example in Vedanta, with the help of which we will try to understand that how Brahman is beyond Vidya and Avidya. That when I see a snake in a rope, the rope is lying in the twilight house, I see a snake. So because of ignorance, I am seeing the snake. But actually it is the rope. When I am seeing it as a snake, it is the rope. Someone comes, brings the torch, focuses it, and then I see, oh, it's actually a rope. My ignorance falls off. Now the Vidya has arisen. I see the rope as it is. Now there are three states. That when I was not in ignorance, before that, it was rope. When I am within that ignorance, though I am seeing it as a snake, it is the same rope. And when my ignorance breaks, I am again established in knowledge. It is the same rope. There is no change in that rope. Though I may see for the time being it as a snake, but actually there is no change. So similarly, the absolute reality, it is as it is. Because of ignorance, For me, it is appearing as this phenomenal existence. When the ignorance falls, the knowledge arises. Again, I will find it is the same ultimate reality which is pervading the entire universe. Then is it that knowledge is created because of my realization? No, it's not created. It's not just the way when I am ignorant about something in this world. So when that what you say, that when the ignorance vanishes, I know. Does that mean the thing was not existing? Just the way Swami Vivekananda in one of his lectures is indicating that Newton discovered gravitation. So when he discovered gravitation, does it mean that before the discovery, the gravitation was not there? It was there. He just discovered, removed the covering of ignorance. And we know the thing which was already there. It was, it is, it will be. The knowledge and ignorance is a temporary state of our existence. The actual Sat is always there. So that in that sense, Master is saying that Brahman is beyond Vidya and Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. It is beyond Maya, the illusion of duality. The world consists of the illusory duality of knowledge and ignorance. It contains knowledge and devotion, and also attachment to woman and gold, righteousness and unrighteousness, good and evil. But Brahman is unattached to this. Good and evil apply to the jiva, the individual soul, as do righteousness and unrighteousness. But Brahman is not at all affected by them. So here Sri Ramakrishna is indicating a thing which is very important, that if our attachment to woman and gold, as in the words of Ramakrishna, is in the domain of Maya, even our spiritual practices, knowledge and devotion is also in the domain of Maya. It's not beyond the domain of Maya. It is still within the domain of Maya. Brahman is beyond both. So what he is indicating is that this knowledge and devotion is something which is also in this domain of Maya. But with the help of that, I can get rid of the attachment of woman and gold. So that's why in some other place, Sri Ramakrishna has indicated these two words, Vidya Maya, Avidya Maya. So knowledge and devotion is Maya, but it is Vidya Maya. And attachment to woman and gold, that also is Maya, that is Avidya Maya. So how to understand it in our day-to-day life? That so many times we have discussed that in this life, our mind is constituted in such a way that what I do out of necessity, that becomes an obsession. Anything today you do out of necessity, you go on repeatedly doing it again and again. It creates as if a groove in your mind that speaks of the neuroplasticity. Once the groove is created, you forget the necessity. Just to do that becomes your obsession, and you start overdoing it. And now what was actually serving some purpose starts harming you because of the obsession. All our attachments can be understood from this perspective. All. Anything we are attached to, that out of necessity we start doing, that just here as Sri Ramakrishna saying woman and gold, what it speaks of, that gold gives us food, the currency gives us food. Woman speaks of lust for a man. And what it speaks of, that continuity of the lineage, procreation. That these are the two things you will find, that gold gives us food, and this the lust speaks of procreation. What it is actually speaking of? It is actually speaking of necessity. From the very beginning of inception of life, just take a small microbe, what it is doing. It's doing constantly two things. It is taking food to sustain itself, and it is procreating. So that when it dies, the lineage continues through the successive generations. So that's the bacteria does, a small microbe does, and that's the common in all the creatures, and at last in human beings. So this necessity made all the creatures do it again and again and again, repeatedly. And as a result, what has happened as a human being, if we just search within, is there any other thing which is binding us? These are the two things. You will find this for this, or for what you say, that to satiate our hunger, we have to earn. That speaks of the goal. And of course, the think of the progeny. This lust is an essential thing. But what has happened? Now, the thing which was necessity, by constant, that it by this so much of repetition, it has created such a deep groove in our mind that it has become a very strong obsession. And it's what a strong obsession it is, that you just open the newspaper, you open any news channel, you will find every day that if any crime is there, has been enacted, at last it boils down to either of these two, 99% of the crime. So what it speaks of, the thing which was necessity has become an obsession, and it is taking us spirally downwards. That's why it is avidyamaya. Now, what is knowledge and devotion? How it is vidyamaya? So now, by default, we have this avidyamaya. By default, from birth, you don't have to try for it. It is there in our genes. What speaks of the vidyamaya? Vidyamaya is something which we can develop by design, which all the spiritual gurus have done. What they have done in any religious tradition, irrespective of the variety of the doctrines, beliefs, there will be so many different beliefs. But is there anything common? The common thing is, you will find repetition. The Christians in the church repeat the same prayer. The Muslims will be repeating the same prayer. And here also, in the Hindu tradition, also the same prayer we are repeating every day. All the culture has rosary. The same mantra you will be repeating. Whether it is Ave Maria, or if it is, that is say that this for the Buddhist, Amitabha Butsu, or in Hindu, there are so many mantras. Even in Islam, there is a rosary, there are mantras. So these repetition, it is one of the very, very core spiritual practice in all the religious tradition. What it speaks of, why this tradition is there? Because all the religious tradition understood that by repeating anything, it creates a groove, and once the groove is created, you develop an obsession for it. So here, there's a scope for designing. You design your mind. What you got by default, that was taking you spirally downwards. Now, by constantly relating to the spiritual dimension of existence, with the help of all those repetitions, all those mantras, all those names of the gods, whatever it may be in tradition, your prayers, when you repeat it again and again, though at the beginning you are doing it willfully, it has been prescribed morning, evening, or 5 times a day, whatever it may be as per your religious tradition, you are repeating it again and again, willfully. Know it for certain that when you do it sincerely, in short time, in a few years, or maybe even in few months, you will suddenly find a liking has developed, a love has developed for doing it. And then the will is replaced by spontaneity, by love. The people say that love God, and you may ask, how can I love God? I don't feel like loving God. First, we have to willfully repeat his name, willfully go on doing the same practice again and again. The love will come naturally, because the mind is constituted that way. What you do repeatedly, that creates an obsession. When it creates a groove, an obsession will be developed. And that's why all the tradition speaks of repetition again and again. You go on doing it. And then that love for their practice will develop. As in the Bhakti tradition, very nicely it has been spoken. Ei Harinam nite nite bhakti mukul fut bechite. That if the devotion is like a bud in your heart, it is yet to bloom, go on taking the name. By the process of taking the name, it will bloom. So once it blooms, now the question is, what happens? In our day-to-day life, we find that when I have some obsession for one thing and I develop an obsession for some other thing, they coexist. It doesn't that by the obsession of the new thing doesn't entail in the end of that previous obsession. They can coexist. But here something wonderful happens. Once you develop that love for divine with the help of all those repetitions, you will find the other desires are gradually diminishing. Why it happens? Because there's a qualitative difference between the spiritual, this love which you have developed through the spiritual practices, and all those inordinate loves which speaks of the sensate pleasures. What is the qualitative difference? All the sensate pleasures of life, which at last boils down to woman and gold, you will find they are dependent on something external. I have to depend on something for wealth. Yes, I have to depend on something external. If the wealth is there, which I have to acquire, and not only acquire, I have to again preserve it. Relations, I have to establish the relation and then establish it. It all depends on something external. As a result, what happens? It is always tinged with concerns, mixed with concerns. Why? Till I don't get the thing I want, whether it is wealth or position in life or any relation, which I am extremely hankering for, till I don't get it, constantly that concern is there. I may not get the relation I want. I may not get the wealth. I may not get the position, power and position which I want. I may not get. Once I get, again the concern is there. I may lose it. The relations may break. My wealth I may lose. My position in life, it may all go. This concern is always there. But this love, when you start thinking of the divine, it is something totally intrinsic. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Chada mama shakoler mama. That when that the moon is the uncle for a small child, the mother says that this moon is your uncle. So the moon is uncle of all. By that, what he means, that when in our life I love someone, if some other person love that person, there will be some jealousy. That I want that the one whom I love, his total love should be reciprocated to me. There shouldn't be any share in that. That's quite obvious. But when you love God, if someone else loves God, there is no question of that jealousy. It is intrinsic. The love of God is universal. So something which you are loving intrinsically, there is no question of clash. There is no question of friction. There is no question of losing. It is always with you. So this is the qualitative difference. In the words of Mirabai, kharche nahi koi, chor na leve, dina dina varata savayo. That it never gets expended. The wealth gets expended. This never gets expended. Actually, it increases. The more you practices, the more the groove deepens, the more intense is your love, the more intense is your obsession. That's we find in all the mystic cultures. Their love is growing. It grows to such an extent that it overwhelms them. Means they don't know how to keep themselves under control. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say very nicely, that the state of the mystics, how he used to say that if in a party, just you think of having a drink, you just have a small peg, you find it's okay that though you enjoy the intoxication, but still you can go on with your socialization, you can balance. But if you continue for a few pegs more, the socialization will fall off. You get totally drunk, totally intoxicated. You cannot socialize anymore. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that if you get too much drunk, you cannot socialize. So in the life of the mystics, we find that starts with that little love, where they can keep the balance with the society as well as that love. But they cannot stop there. The more you practice, the more the groove deepens, the more stronger the obsession, and then that overwhelms you. So there is no question of expending out. It increases. So kharche nahi koi. Chor, no one can steal it away from you. It is something within. Dina dina varata. It goes on increasing. The more you practice, the more it increases. So this is the love which takes you spirally upwards. It makes you forget everything else. Why it makes you forget? All other worldly loves can coexist, but this cannot coexist. As we gave that example so many times, that till now in our mind there were so many roads which had this crossroads. My interest clashes with other interests. I was passing through this crossroads. And when you are going through the traffic, you have to follow the signal because there are so many crossroads. It's not that you can drive freely. Your interest is going to be hampered, obstructed by someone else's interest. You won't get the green signal always. You have to get the red signal. But if you're on a freeway, then what happens? There's no question of signal. You simply are driving. So this love, new love, is like designing a freeway. As per the default, all the roads were having crossroads. In the entire process of our evolution, all the roads which we have developed did have crossroads. There was competition. The food which I want, others also want. There's a competition. Relations, positions, everywhere we are in the crossroads. This new love, there is no as such crossroad. If crossroads are there, you find, then know that devotion is not pure. It is a show of devotion, not the real devotion. I want to show that I am very religious. Then, of course, the crossroads can develop. We do find in the name of religion, so much of hypocrisy is there. Why it happens? Because it is not the pure love. It is a show of love. Then again, there will be the crossroads. But the one who has developed that real devotion by repeating the name of Lord, he is in no way in any of the crossroads. That the love which he feels, he has to show no one. He is quite happy with himself, and it goes on increasing. And this is the thing which speaks of the real meditation. It's no more will. You don't have to will to sit down and meditate. Just like the mother never sits down to meditate on the child lest she forgets her. The love makes her think of the child in all her activities, whatever she may be doing. She can never forget. It has become like the toothache. So this love becomes something spontaneous. And spontaneous love, as it grows more and more, what it happens? That all the spiritual realization actually speaks of. What is the spiritual realization actually? Is a falling of the ego. That this sense that I am this limited body-mind complex. This is the cause of our ignorance. When this ego falls off, immediately you get established in that absolute knowledge. It is the absolute reality which is getting reflected in your body-mind complex to develop that ego, that I am. There's like the sun in the sky, which gets reflected in each of the waves in the ocean. All the reflections are the egos, creating as if an individual identity. Each wave thinks I am an individual with the reflected sun as my real soul. All are thinking. But is that reflected sun the reality? No, it is just a reflection. So if the wave subsides, then where that reflection will go? It will merge with that sun. Similarly, the wave of ego, when it subsides, when the mind constantly in the form of waves, it is rising, when it subsides, you will find that the ego has merged with that absolute reality, that you alone are there. In all the mystic experiences, you will find that unitary experience has been spoken of. Even those who believe in the dualism, I am God, but when they go to that reality, even in the words of Jesus, they have to say, I and my Father are one. The same Jesus who says that I am that God is the vine, and that's what you say, that I am a grape, and He is the entire, what you say, the vine. The same Jesus is saying that I and my Father are one. So from which sense? That this, even from the duality, it falls off. When you go to that extreme love, tremendous love. In love, what happens? The object which you're loving, you're thinking so intensely that all the thought of everything else falls off. You will find that one who is mad with love, everything they forget. And when that love intensifies, it becomes so intense that at last, the last thing to fall off is our ego. Even that also is taken away. The mind is totally engrossed with the object of love. That has been spoken of as samadhi. The samadhi's definition is wonderful. Triputi Veda. The Veda, when I'm meditating, even when I'm in an intense meditation, there is a clear distinction of three things: dhyana, dhyata, dheya. The process of meditation, the object of meditation, and the one who is meditating. The one who is meditating is dhyata, the object of meditation is dheya, and dhyana is the process by which these two are connected. In the samadhi, what happens? That bheda, that collapses. These three triads collapses. Why? The ego has fallen off. That I am meditating, this idea is no more there. You are one with the object of meditation. You have as if created a hole in the wall of ego, and you're peeping through it. And what you see? That expanse of that absolute reality. So now we will find that why knowledge and devotion, though it is in the world of Maya, still in the world of Maya, the devotion, it is with the help of the same mind with which you are attached to the world, the same mind you are using to develop devotion. You are not beyond the mind, but this can take you away, beyond this mind. It falls off at last when you enter to that intense flow. In modern psychology, these are the two subjects which are studied quite broadly. This is neuroplasticity and flow. And these two can actually speak a lot about our spiritual evolution. It starts with the neuroplasticity. You're designing, you're repeating the same thing. That neuroplasticity will develop an obsession for the new thing which you have designed, that new liking. And once that spontaneity comes because of that liking, now the flow ensues. And that flow can take you to that absolute realization. So now you will find that how nicely Sri Ramakrishna's word you can relate. That what is knowledge and ignorance? There's this new designed way of relating to that absolute reality is the knowledge and devotion. That also belongs to the mind, and attachment to the gold, woman and gold, that also belongs to the right, to the mind. So that's the thing. But the absolute reality is beyond that. The world consists of illusory duality of knowledge and ignorance. It contains knowledge and devotion, and also attachment to woman and gold, righteousness and unrighteousness, good and evil. But Brahman is unattached to this. Good and evil apply to the jiva, the individual soul. So do righteousness and unrighteousness. But Brahman is not at all affected by them. So that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna, that what he's saying, we're trying to just expand. So why we are doing this? That we again and again we will say that the master's words are so simple, we feel we have understood. And many will be speaking that Ramakrishna, that Swami Vivekananda is giving these lectures on Vedanta. What it has to do with the Ramakrishna's teaching. He has spoken in such a simple word that actually now you will find that Vivekananda's entire lecture is a commentary on that. We think, and that's the wonderful gift of Ramakrishna. He makes all of us feel that we have understood him. All of us we feel. But that's why all the senior monks say that go on reading the gospel. As your understanding will be more and more clear, you will find the same words have much deeper meaning. So the gospel is a wonderful book. It actually testifies our own spiritual evolution, our own, that more and more clarification of our ideas. It speaks of that. When first time you have read, though you thought you have understood, but you have understood in a very limited sense. The second time you read, the idea you find is much more broadened. Your perspectives are broadening, and your vision is broadening, and the meanings are getting more and more clear. It is taking you to higher and higher understanding of the same words. One Man may read the Bhagavata by the light of a lamp, and another may commit a forgery by that very light. But the lamp is unaffected. The sun sheds its light on the wicked as well as on the virtuous. That's the way sun is not affected. The same light with the help of which one is committing forgery, counterfeiting the coins, or another is reading the scripture, the same sunlight, the light is not affected. How can we relate it to the discussion just we had now? It is the consciousness which, when comes association with the mind gets activated. With this mind, I can go spirally downwards, but for that, same consciousness has to activate the mind. If it is not there, mind by itself cannot get activated. The mind has become illumined because of the conscious principle is in association with that, and with that, first I go spirally downwards because of all those obsessions. It's the same light when it is reflecting the mind. When I learn from the experiences of life, I with the help of the same mind, again I move spirally upwards. But is in any way the conscious principle is getting affected? It is as it is. It is only that because of ignorance, I am getting more and more bound in my what you say, in your own mind, like the cocoon gets at last. If it doesn't come out of its shell, it dies in its own cocoon. Sometimes our mind becomes like a cocoon in which we die. But if we realize that we are going to die in proper time, we have to break out through it. And like a butterfly, we have to fly off. So this is the thing which has been indicated. The mind has to be in association with the conscious principle to be activated. Now, what I do with that active mind, it depends on me. If I'm in ignorance, I will be going spirally downwards. If I have realized that it is not going to take me anywhere, I'm using the same mind to come out of it. But in no way the absolute reality is affected by what I'm doing with it. So you may ask, how then one can explain misery and sin and unhappiness? The answer is that these apply only to jiva. That as long as I'm in ignorance, this all sin, unhappiness, misery, everything belongs to that ignorance, the state of that ignorance. When I am feeling that I am unhappy, the real conscious principle is as it is. As it is because of the ignorance, I am identified with the body-mind complex, and that's why the changes there makes me miserable. But I am the same thing, the same absolute reality. It in no way affects me. So it is because of Maya that I feel that I am going through all these experiences. Just when I'm dreaming, in the dream is real. When I'm dreaming, I don't feel that I'm just dreaming. They're all real. And all the nightmare at last breaks. And when you wake up, then you feel, oh, all these horrible things which I was thinking is happening to me, which was all just mere a dream. So as long as you're in the dream, that's the state of the jiva. So here, our real life is also a dream. That the dream which we have at night when we are sleeping is a dream within the dream. But this itself is a dream. When this dream breaks, then you are established with the reality. But as long as I am dreaming, I am identified with all those characters. I think I am that, and that is affecting me. There's a wonderful story which Swami Vivekananda used to elucidate to describe this, to illustrate this concept of Maya. That you all know, but it's good in this context to relate to that story. That once Narada, he asked Krishna that everywhere in the scriptures, everyone speaks of Maya. Or what actually is this Maya? Krishna told, okay, I will explain you. Come, let us go for a walk. So after a long walk, Krishna told that I am feeling a bit thirsty. Can you fetch me a glass of water? Narada told, okay, well, you sit under the shade of the tree. Yes, I am seeing a village nearby. Let me go there and I will fetch you a glass of water. So Krishna told, okay. So Krishna was sitting on the shade of the tree and Narada went to fetch a glass of water. He walked down to the nearby village, which was visible. knocked the door of one of the house. A very beautiful lady, young lady, opened the door. Narada started conversing with her, and in the process of conversation, he has started developing love for her. And he forgot that in the meantime, the father of the girl came out, seeing this young man, that Narada was a young sage that time, seeing him, he just asked, would you be our guest for a few days? Immediately agreed. He agreed, and he's just started staying with them. And then he asked the girl whether he was willing to marry him. He told, you ask my father. He asked his father, and that's how the father also agreed. They married, and he was the only child of the father. So after a few days, when the father died, and the entire property became to Narada, and they were having a happy married life. And they had 3 children. They were quite prosperous. And suddenly there was a flood. One night, the dam of the river broke. There was a heavy rain. Flash flood was there. And when Narada woke up, already the village was under waters. Narada immediately woke up his wife and the 3 children and told, we have to move out. So now to move out of the village, they have to cross the river. But though the river was not deep, but because of the flood water, the stream was very, very, the waters was flowing very, very forcefully. So though cautiously, he was trying to cross the river. How he was trying? So he had one child on his shoulders, and he got hold of this other one child in one hand, and was holding one was on the lap, and another was in his hand, and wife was along with him moving. And as they were about to cross the river, suddenly the wife was carried away by the stream. It was such a strong stream. And now, in a reflex to save his wife, he just lost hold of the child whom he was holding. So the child also started getting washed away. Now, to save both of them, the one who was he was holding with the other hand, he also started being washed away. And Narada, knowing not what to do, he was after them, chasing after them, with the hope that somehow he will catch them. In the process, the one who was sitting on the shoulder was washed away. And then Narada himself started going along with the flow. The flow was so strong. He couldn't find anywhere where the wife and the children has gone. But he himself somehow got stuck with a rock on the bank of the river, and he was saved that way. He was on the bank, but he could find no one. The wife and all has been flowed away. All has been taken away. And he was now crying, just miserably, was sitting on the bank. He was crying that where all has gone. Miserably, he was crying, weeping, wailing. And suddenly he sensed a tap on the back. Someone was tapping on his back. So he looked around. So it was Krishna. He told her, where is my glass of water? Then a glass of water? Well, yeah, just half an hour back, you just told that I'm going to the village to fetch a glass of water. I'm just waiting for the glass of water. Where is the glass of water? So this is Maya. So this is beyond space-time causation, just like in the dream. That night dream, most probably years have passed away. So this is the concept of Maya, that when you're in ignorance, the time, space, causation, everything comes into picture, giving you the sense of reality. All this misery, sin, unhappiness is within this domain. As long as I am in the dream, I am the Jiva. Actually, I am the same Brahman. How I become the Jiva? Because of ignorance. When the ignorance falls off, the Jiva is no more there. You become one with the Absolute. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna, how nicely. So that's why we find this is his conversation with Vidyasagar. You will find Ramakrishna is a wonderful person. Just a few days back, someone was saying that in the gospel we find Sri Ramakrishna is speaking only of devotion, devotion, devotion. And in Ramakrishna mission, it's all Vedanta you are preaching. How come you are following Ramakrishna? You know what happened actually when the gospel, the gospel, how it came into existence. It's in the weekend, it's on the Sundays, where the devotees were free. All the householders who were free, they did not have to go for work. That's the day they could come to Sri Ramakrishna. Even the author of the gospel is a householder. He also most of the time could visit Ramakrishna on the weekend. On the weekend, it is only the householder devotees who were there. To speak of Atman Brahman to them will be too much, because they are so much involved with the life, and he used to speak of them devotion. Just resign to the divine, that whatever you are doing. So we find that scripture is full of devotion. But the same Ramakrishna, when he is with someone who can really relate to that Advaitic Vedanta, like Vidyasagar, he's a Pandit. Just see, his conversation is totally different. So it is to whom he's speaking. That all the sannyasi disciples of Ramakrishna, they were not only the weekend visitors. Now and then they used to visit Ramakrishna, stay with him. Even on the weekdays when no one were with him, it is these young boys who were with Ramakrishna, his chosen few. To them he spoke of, there was a Ashtavakra Gita in Ramakrishna's room. He never allowed anyone to touch it. But when Narendranath used to come, he will ask him to read it for him. It is full of that Advaitic knowledge. And at that time, Narendranath was actually a member of Brahma Samaj, where they speak of Brahman, but that is Saguna Brahman, God with attributes. And we are not one with him. We should relate to him through devotion. But this Ashtavakra Gita speaks of Aham Brahmasmi, that I am that absolute. So immediately Narendranath would retort back, I won't read that book. It is blasphemy, because he was from Brahma Samaj. And Ramakrishna is to cajole him by saying, see, I am illiterate. I cannot read. It's not for you. Will you read it for me? So that's how he made him read that. Just see, his instructions are different for different groups. So now you will understand that how these Vedanta centers came into existence. It has been formed by Swami Vivekananda. And this direct, the monastic disciples of Ramakrishna, to whom what he used to speak, you can understand from this conversation with Vidyasagar, how he's speaking of the same person who will be saying that just have devotion to God. You need not think of all those jnana vichara, that just have resigned to divine. The same person, when he's in presence of Vidyasagar, his conversation is totally different, because he knows that he has studied all these things. He's a Pandit. And he's just see to what a sublime level he's taken his conversation. So you may ask, how then can one explain the misery and unhappiness? The answer is that applies only to Jiva. Brahman is unaffected by them. There is poison in a snake. That's again this Ramakrishna's wonderful capacity to explain the profound truth in such a simple language, with so simple example. There is a poison in a snake, but though others may die if bitten by it, the snake itself is not affected by the poison. So how this simple example, that Lord, it is God the Maya is his. The Maya is not something apart from the divine. It belongs to him, but it cannot affect him. He is Mayadhish. He is beyond Maya. That the poison which can kill others, the same poison he is carrying, the snake is carrying, it doesn't affect him. He is Mayadhish. So even in Bhagavad Gita, we find the idea of Atma Maya and Guna Maya. In the 14th sloka of the 7th chapter, that's very nicely saying, Daivi Yesha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratyaya Mamevaye Prapadyante Mayam Etam Tarantite. It's very simple. That it is very difficult for you to go beyond Maya by your own endeavor. This Gunamai Maya. What it is, we won't go to the discussion again, because to understand this, what is Gunamaya, Atmaya, it will need one class. And it is not in the context here also. Just to understand that those who are bound by the Maya, how to get rid of it. Mamaya Duratya, it is almost impossible. But there is a way out. Mameva ye prapadyante. Take resort to me, the one who is beyond the Maya. I can pull out of you, right from you. So when as if that in school we used to explain this to the small children. This Veda. Suppose you have fallen in a well, and with all your effort you cannot come out. It's quite high, and then someone, what you say, that extends the hand, but it doesn't reach you. But when you jump, then somehow you can hold his hand, and now he can pull you out. So that's the balance between the Purushakar and Kripa. A little jump from your is necessary, but he is waiting there with the extended hands to pull you out. So take resort to him, call on him. That much is the effort. Rest all is his. He will take you out of it. He is the Mayadhish. He is beyond that. Though the Maya is his, he is beyond that. We will again elaborate on this concept of the Mayadhish and Mayadin before we proceed to the next conversation again in the next class. With this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.